Subaru is a company discovering that the traditional rules of car building just aren't valid any longer. Customers are demanding more adventurous products that cost less to run and offer new levels of style, safety and versatility. Which is why the brand's XV crossover model is so key for its future. It moves Subaru firmly into the here and now. It isn't inexpensive at first glance and might not seem to be as polished as some rivals, but it's more capable than most of them in more ways than you might think. The crossover. Arguably, it's the motor industry's fastest growing market segment, and in Subaru's XV, that's exactly what we have here. By now, you're probably already familiar with the concept behind this kind of car, but even if you're not, you're probably well acquainted with the end result. Whether packaged as a Ford Kuga, a Peugeot 3008, or most successfully as a Nissan Qashqai, the idea is the same. A family hatchback with SUV attitude, but none of the clunky connotations associated with Freelander-style small 4x4s. None of the off-roading ability either, or the solid toughness in many cases. Some crossover models don't even offer a four-wheel drive option, and those that do usually limit it to ridiculously pricey derivatives. Crossovers these days are more about fashion than substance. But what if you could get one that matched Qashqai-like style with Freelander-like off-road ability? What if this class of car, in other words, could actually walk the walk as well as talk the talk? That would be quite something. That'd be unique. And that is exactly what this XV claims to be designed to deliver. If any brand was going to be able to create a car capable of doing this, you'd put money on Subaru to do it. After all, they were building models of this kind way before the concept became fashionable, with a history going all the way back to 1995 and the launch of the legacy Outback, a chunky all-wheel drive estate, then followed by more overtly SUV-like Subaru crossovers like the Tribeca and the Forester. None of which really caught the imagination of British buyers, but this car might. It's already Subaru's best seller here, and it's a breath of fresh air amongst prissier crossover models in this segment. Let's check it out. Crossover models as a breed are all about what they say. The raised driving position, the big wheels, the plastic body cladding, and not a lot else. Subaru as a brand doesn't hold with that. Here's a company that cares about what its cars can actually do, as well as the school-run statement that they make, with the result that this XV is a lot more capable than most buyers will expect. It does, in short, offer something a little different from the Qashqai and Kuga norm in this segment, something you get a feel for immediately you slip behind the wheel. Twist the ignition key and you know you're in a Subaru thanks to the engine's characteristic thrumming boxer beat. So how does it fare on the road? Let's find out. All three of the mainstream four-cylinder engines on offer use the boxer configuration, one in which the cylinders lay flat and then whiz back and forth like a boxer's fists. There are two main petrol options, a 112 brake horsepower 1.6 and a 148 brake horsepower 2-litre unit, and both are available with either a manual gearbox or a 6-speed Lineatronic CVT automatic. Most UK buyers, though, will choose the manual-only 2-litre diesel 145 brake horsepower engine that I'm using here. The driving position is very good, with plenty of adjustment for both seat and steering wheel, and these front A-pillars are refreshingly slim, so there's a good view out when you're coming out of junctions or going through roundabouts. Only rear three-quarter vision could be better. Owners will really be relying on those rear parking sensors when manoeuvring into tight parking spaces. At tick over speeds and low speed work, the engine's slight lack of refinement is a bit of an issue, but you don't notice that once you get beyond the city limits and start to exercise the boxer diesel a bit more. Rest to 60 occupies 9.3 seconds on the way to a top speed of 120 miles an hour with this engine fitted. Now there's a useful 350 Newton meters of torque accessed through a slightly notchy 6-speed manual gearbox. And around the twisty stuff, well, I'd actually had quite high hopes here, given Subaru's claims that because of the way the Boxer engine can be mounted low in the car, this model can boast the lowest centre of gravity in the segment, which ought to make it quite taut around the twisty stuff. That might be true in theory, but in practice, the XV can feel a bit precarious the first time you throw it into a bend. Stick with it though, and there's actually a surprising amount of grip. In fact, the more confident you get, the more fun it becomes, or at least it would be quite fun if there were a bit more feel through the electric power steering. Right, we can't put it off any longer. It's time to do what most XV owners will never do and take this vehicle off-road. Something this Subaru is better equipped to do than most of its contemporaries, thanks to 220 millimeters of ground clearance. That's 30 millimeters more than you get in a Nissan Qashqai, and more even than you get in a Land Rover Freelander. Not that you'll be taking on the Rubicon Trail. A 19.6 degree approach angle means that really steep head-on inclines will probably be beyond you. And of course, like most crossover models, this one lacks really serious off-road mechanicals, things like a low-range transfer box or individual lockable axle diffs. But unless you're somewhere you really shouldn't have ventured to in the first place with your XV, then you won't really be needing that sort of stuff anyway. Across the range, there's a symmetrical four-wheel drive system fitted, and in manual models like this one, torque is distributed equally, 50-50 front to rear, with a viscous coupling to change that percentage distribution should either front or rear wheels lose grip. It's as pure a four-wheel drive system as you could hope to find, and it really works, keeping you going even if only one wheel has grip. There's also a neat hill start assist system which stops the car from drifting backwards as you start off from rest on a sharp incline. There's also a very clever VDC stability control system which comes in very useful if you forget quite how muddy your tyres are. And you can switch it off if you want to maintain the kind of momentum creating wheel spin that can get you through really slippery sections. Of course, if you're a typical crossover customer, then you might be wondering whether this sort of capability is really necessary. I suppose the answer is that it's a bit like having a watch that's waterproof to 200 meters. You'll probably never need it, but it's good to know it's there. The XV's basic shape is a fairly faithful representation of the crossover norm, but it's got a chunky, purposeful stance that you don't often see in this type of car to this extent, and it's got some really interesting detailing too. I particularly like the 5-spoke black and silver alloy wheels, if only because they remind me of the Matchbox cars I used to play with as a kid. The front end is very neatly finished with shapely headlamps, a gaping air intake below the number plate and a recognisable Subaru front grille. Moving back, you get these Audi all-road style wheel arch extensions which look agreeably rugged, and at the rear this tidily finished bumper with dark cladding extending from the rear wheel arch. Now, you lose a lot of the contrast if you go for one of the darker paint colours, though some may balk at the tangerine orange finish that I have here, which has become something of an XV signature colour. Inside, the cabin is a step up from the rather plasticky efforts that Subaru has managed in recent years, but it's still not quite of the class of the best of this car's European rivals. Some of the ergonomics are a little bit haphazard too, such as the heating controls that are at the bottom of this centre stack, while the digital readout for them is displayed right at the top, or the way that the seat heater controls are hidden away here behind the handbrake. There's some compensation to be found in the build quality though, which matches the rugged, built-to-last feeling that pervades across the rest of the car. And there are some really nice details too, like the way that the heater controls are large and chunky enough to be used by a gloved hand, or the way that the USB and aux-in points are nicely concealed here in the storage box that's situated between the front seats. Accessibility to the rear is helped by doors that open wider than those fitted to an equivalent Impreza model. Inside, Subaru talks of room for 3 adults, but this high centre transmission tunnel will make that difficult to achieve on all but the shortest journeys. It'll be fine for 3 children though. On the plus side, the comparatively long wheelbase you get with this car means that there's plenty of legroom, and the space available is helped by the way that you can easily slide your feet under the front seats. Out back, the 380 litre boot capacity is a little less than some rivals offer, but there is a small underfloor compartment, and of course you can push the rear seats forward to free up more space, up to 1,270 litres in fact, although the rear seats don't fold quite flat. Now at first glance, this XV looks to be a fair bit pricier than some of its most obvious Qashqai-like crossover rivals, but that's before you take into account its standard four-wheel drive. That's a pricey extra on the Nissan, and it's not even available on crossover models like Peugeot's 3008. Now once you factor in four-wheel drive on something like a Nissan Qashqai or a Ford Kuga, a crossover like that, well, you're really looking at paying the same sort of money that you would for this Subaru. How much is that? Well, XV pricing tends to sit in the £21,500 to £30,000 bracket. Subaru's UK importers would have liked those figures to be lower, but unfavourable exchange rates did for that. Of course, you could argue that the same kind of outlay would get you something really quite upmarket in this segment, an all-wheel drive BMW X1 or Audi Q3, for example. And the same kind of spend could get you a compact, reasonably capable soft-roading SUV, like say a Land Rover Freelander, a Volkswagen Tiguan or a Toyota RAV4. All tempting options. But before considering them, it's worth also considering quite what you get for your money with this Subaru. There's the usual Subaru bulletproof engineering for a start, and whichever of the Boxer engines you choose, 1.6 or 2 litre petrol or this 2 litre Boxer diesel, you'll find equipment levels that put those of the German brands to shame. So even on entry-level variants, you get things like 17-inch alloy wheels, front fog lights, LED daytime running lamps, wiper de-icers, heated power mirrors, automatic air conditioning, a 4-speaker MP3 compatible CD stereo with controls on the steering wheel, a dash-top multifunction display and heated seats. Most will opt for a mid-spec model like this one with cruise control, a stereo upgrade, Bluetooth, iPod and USB connectivity, some leather bits inside, some colour-coded sections outside, rear privacy glass, HID headlamps and a rear parking camera. Safety-wise, there are the expected front, side, curtain and knee airbags, plus the normal electronic aids to try and make sure that hopefully you'll never have to use them. Aids for things like braking, traction and stability control. It's also worth pointing out that this car scored a maximum 5-star rating in the Euro NCAP safety tests. So what, I hear you say, doesn't every new car manage that these days? Well, the difference here is in the breakdown of the test scores. This car scored high marks in all 4 of the categories tested, but achieved 90% when it came to the child occupant category. Now that's the highest of any car on sale in the UK. It also scored very high marks for protection of infants of up to 18 months old, being singled out for specific praise when it came to side impact protection. Now, with most crossover type vehicles of this kind being bought by families, this is really something to consider when making a sensible, measured decision about purchasing a vehicle of this kind. It's fair to say that Subaru weren't exactly quick out of the blocks when it came to driving down the cost of vehicle ownership. Their first diesel, after all, didn't appear till 2008. But since then, the brand has rapidly been making up for lost time, with the diesel on offer here having been tweaked and teased to improve fuel consumption and drive down emissions, and a new range of petrol engines doing much to improve the brand's reputation. Previously, they'd been seen as a marque that was rather fond of drink. So what's changed? Well, certainly features like better aerodynamics and the adoption of a new CVT automatic gearbox have certainly played their part in improving incremental efficiency, as has the introduction of a stop-start system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck at the lights or you're waiting in urban traffic. Maybe the biggest single improvement though is the reduction in weight. That obviously has huge benefits in terms of lowering emissions and improving economy. So to put that into some sort of perspective, an XV with two 12-stone adults on board is still lighter than an entry-level Nissan Qashqai. Opt, as most XV customers will, for the 2-litre diesel, and you'll get a car that's capable of 50.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 146 grams per kilometre of CO2. Go for a petrol model, say the entry-level 1.6, and you're looking at 44.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 151 grams per kilometre of CO2. But with these petrol variants, you'll get the best fuel and emission results if you opt for the Lineartronic CVT automatic gearbox. With the Auto 2-litre petrol model, for example, you'll get 42.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and return 153 grams per kilometre of CO2. Now that means that you can expect a decent operating range out of the 60-litre fuel tank of around 660 miles. And everyday owners can expect to achieve these kinds of quoted figures on a reasonably regular basis, thanks to an eco meter, which is in the multifunction dash display and is fitted to all but the most basic XV variants. All XV variants also get a gear shift up change indicator so that you can match your changes precisely. Insurance is grouped 17 to 22 for petrol models and groups 25 to 27 if you're going for a diesel. Residual values, well, they won't be quite up to BMW and Audi standards, and it's here that owners may feel the most financial hardship. But Subaru is certainly committed to doing everything it can to make the whole ownership experience as painless as possible. And a good example is their ETCO, Everything Taken Care Of package. It's the most comprehensive ownership plan around. It's a 3-year plan with a total of 11 different elements. Everything from coverage for minor scratches and dents, alloy wheel repairs, lost key coverage. You've got a monthly wash and vac at your local dealer, an annual valet and a wheel alignment check. You've got coverage for your first MOT and for any expenses to get you through it. There's an accident management service. There's a contribution towards out-of-pocket excess insurance bills. There's even the facility to store winter tyres if you need them. What's more, the benefits can be passed on to subsequent owners, which should help with residual values, given that the package in total can be worth up to £7,000 and comes in addition to the normal 3-year 60,000 mile warranty that you get with all Subaru models. And it's a whole package that's included within the price of the car. Here's a car you have to think about. At first glance, it seems a bit expensive and not quite as flashy as some other crossover segment rivals. But take account of its standard four-wheel drive system, its brilliant build quality, its lovely charismatic boxer engines, and its surprising off-road ability. Then add in high equipment levels, class-leading safety, and a quite excellent after-sales care package. Starting to look quite tempting now, isn't it? Okay, so no, it's not perfect. Ride and refinement could be better, the interior isn't the last word in design elegance, and the boot could be bigger. But these aren't deal breakers, and they can't begin to dilute this XV's many virtues. Subaru, it seems on this evidence, is a company that hasn't quite got the hang of the whole style over substance thing when it comes to crossover models of this kind. And I, for one, am quite glad of it.